The next day, Van is just glad that they beat that forest dragon without any losses. Esparta tells him that those ramparts he made served their purpose, because without them, it might have been a different story. That aside, now that he's made those sturdy ramparts, Esparta mentions that he should turn his attention to city planning next. Van then remembers that he told him before that he should aim to build a city for 10,000 to live in. Esparta explains that to accomplish that and fashion an attractive city, they need new residents. Van easily understands his reasoning, but before he can say anything, Till comes into his office to inform him that Belle and Rango have returned with folk from the Merry Chamber of Commerce. They said that they would buy the materials from the forest dragon, so Van decides to go meet them right away. While they inspect the forest dragon parts, Van wonders how much the Merry Chamber of Commerce merchants will buy them for. Rango tells him that it's a large forest dragon, and its scales, claws, fangs, and eyes are all in pretty good condition, so he'll probably get at least 100 platinum. Van gives it some thought because if he remembers correctly, 1 platinum is worth around 100 million yen, which means 100 platinum would mean a dragon is worth 10 billion yen. Van is shocked by that information, and for once he thinks that he just won the jackpot. The merchants finally confirm that it's a real dragon, so they ask Van to entrust these materials to the Merry Chamber of Commerce. They assure him that they're the most reputable traders and have the royal family's backing, so they'll buy them from him at the highest price he'll get. Van gets really excited by this and asks them how much they can sell them for. However, despite what the brothers said, the merchants tell him that, given the current market, they can give him about 60 platinum. This leaves Van a little confused, because he was pretty sure that he had won the jackpot. He decides to consult with Belle and Rango before giving them an answer, but the merchants try to stop him, saying that those brothers are still young as merchants go. Van completely ignores them and tells the brothers that it sounds like they might not get as much as he thought since the merchants quoted him 60 platinum. Both Belle and Rango think that's crazy because it's obvious that this is all of the highest quality. The merchants suddenly interrupt them, trying to remind them that they're part of the Merry Chamber of Commerce too, so they should play along. Belle doesn't agree with them and tells them that as merchants, they should give a proper appraisal. The merchants explain that no other merchants are coming to this remote village for a whole year, so even if they only offer 60 platinum, that kid has no choice but to sell. Van simply stands aside, not mentioning that he can actually hear all their whispering. He starts thinking that he can't blame them for haggling though, since 1 platinum is worth 100 million. However, the brothers clarify that they aim to do things fairly, no matter who they're dealing with or what they're negotiating over. After all, they believe that will lead to greater future profit, and with Van, it'll definitely pay off. The merchants are not happy about this at all, so they warn them that when the president learns of this, they both will be kicked out of the Merry Chamber of Commerce. The brothers can't do anything about this, so Van proposes that they found their own trading company. This shocks them more than he expected, and Rango tells him that he makes it sound easy. Belle explains that they have to fulfill 3 conditions to establish a trading company. First, they must pay the Merchants Guild registration fee. Second, their own shop. And third, get an endorsement from a titled noble. Van thinks that the first 2 conditions are easy enough, but he knows that the last one is an issue. The only person with a title who's likely to help them is Panamera, so he decides to go talk to her and explain the situation. To his surprise, Panamera easily accepts to help them, so Van asks her if she's really okay with it, because he heard that the Merry Chamber of Commerce is favored by the royal family. Panamera just asks him to think about it, and explains that she found a small trading company as a newly elevated noble, so recognizing it is no skin off their noses. If anything, it'd be a bad look for the royal family if they didn't. Besides, she has no land or knights of her own, so if she wants to climb the ladder, she needs to do things that will get people talking. If she does this, word will spread that she helped 2 earnest merchants, so it's a win for both sides. Van quickly jumps to tell her that she can say she defeated the dragon because people will talk about that, and it means his family won't find out. Panamera tells him that his thought process has the oddest blind spots, and explains that dragons are rarely slain. Even if she said that she killed it, they'd want to know in detail how she managed it, and their own investigations would lead to him anyway. Van's hope instantly dies down, and he wonders what he'll do if his family summons him home. Panamera clarifies that there is one way to avoid that, which is getting himself a title. She explains that all nobles have a title, going from knight, baronet, baron, viscount, count, marquis, and duke. She's worked her way up from knight, the lowest title, but since he's the son of a marquis, they'd probably make him baron to start with. That's why he has to get himself a title and found a new house, so his family can't mess with him anymore. He just needs to declare that he slew the dragon, since all she really did was pin it down. Van hesitates, because that would make him really stand out, but Panamera reminds him that he can become famous for being the 8-year-old who slew a dragon, and use that achievement to earn a title. That said, she admits that she understands how he feels, because when she first earned her title, she gained more enemies, and people trying to use her came out of the woodwork. However, she simply reduced all of them to ash with her elemental magic. That's why if any enemies show up, he must not hesitate to fire his ballistae at them. After all, a dozen corpses in his wake will stop people from opposing him. Panamera laughs after saying that, while Van only thinks that he just learned a terrifying tip for navigating life. Leaving that aside, he mentions that if he claims it was all his doing, then she can't use it to support her own bid for promotion. Panamera stares at him with an intimidating expression, saying that she hasn't done anything to have an 8-year-old worrying everything about her. Van quickly takes his words back, saying that he's now worried about his own safety because he doesn't want her to eat him. Panamera just laughs at that and asks him not to worry, saying that she won't eat him for another 5 years. So, to help him grow even bigger, she'll let him take the glory for slaying this dragon. Van doesn't feel safe even after she leaves, since he apparently only has 5 years left to live. He tries to forget about that and informs the brothers that Panamera will endorse them, which means they can found their own trading company. The brothers are more than happy to know this, and after their little celebration, they waste no time and ask Van to sell those dragon materials to them. Van easily accepts, of course, and the brothers even offer him 130 platinum, saying that they want to repay him for all he's done for them. After they seal the deal, the brothers decide to go to the royal capital to sell everything. However, they soon find out that the carriage is gone because the Merry Chamber of Commerce merchants left with it. Panamera explains that they're just waiting for the brothers to come crying to them. After all, if they can't transport the goods, they have no choice but to listen to them. Van simply says that he'll make a new carriage for them in that case, and Panamera mentions that they can have her warhorse to pull the carriage. She explains that they're well trained, and their stamina and speed are on another level. In no time, Panamera and the brothers leave the village with the goods in a new carriage, and they even outrun the Merry Chamber of Commerce merchants. When they see that the brothers are with the Viscountess, the merchants easily connect the dots, knowing that they can start their own trading company with the cooperation of a noble. They finally get to the royal capital in the kingdom of Scuderia, and Panamera heads to the audience chamber to see the king, Dino and Sora Belrine. After hearing what she has to say, the king admits that he assumed she had come to petition him for a higher rank, yet she actually wants him to grant a title to someone else. Panamera confirms this, and explains that the man in question is the lord of a remote village, and he's currently safeguarding it, so he couldn't make it to the royal capital. The king asks her why she would recommend such a man to the nobility, and Panamera tells him that it's for his great deeds so far, and his potential that overshadows them. That instantly captures the king's interest, because given her prowess, for Panamera to recommend him means he can expect great things. Still, he wants to know what manner of feats he could have achieved in a village so remote they haven't stationed troops or knights there. With no hesitation, Panamera informs him that he slew a forest dragon, and that shocks everyone in the audience chamber. The king asks her if this lord is an elemental mage, and Panamera clarifies that his magical aptitude is for production magic. She then informs him that it's the son of Marquis Ferdio, Van Nay Ferdio, a lord who is barely 8 years old. The king clearly is keen to know more about him, so Panamera tells him that the moment Van arrived in the village he was to rule over, he found it under attack by bandits. However, he protected the village and killed the bandits with the few subordinates and adventurers escorting him. After that, the young boy used his production magic to surround the village with walls, put in a moat, rebuild the ramshackle homes, and improve the village's defenses. That's when the forest dragon attacked, and she assisted in the slaying of the dragon, but all she did was pin it down. Van and his subordinates used their strength to slay it without suffering a single casualty. The king mentions that it sounds hard to believe, but that's when Panamera decides to show him a fang from the slain dragon. This leaves everyone in stunned silence, and Panamera tells the king that she'd love for him to see how much this village has changed in its short time under Van's stewardship. She's sure a man as wise as him would make Van the lord of a territory even greater in size for the sake of their nation's defense. The king is finally convinced, and he finds all of this very interesting, so he mentions that he would like to meet Van as soon as possible. When Panamera exits the audience chamber, she asks everyone outside to let it be known that Van Nay Ferdio slew a dragon, and, to honor his achievement, he has been made a baron. In the meantime, we see that Van remade the uniform houses into something fancier, and then reconstructed the village center. Then, in addition to that, he built 2 towers, the Oligo Tower and the Grape Tower. Towers serve as symbols of a settlement and allow them to detect enemies from afar, so this has also fortified their defenses. Everyone in the village can now enjoy their lives in peace, and Van is content with this. Till hears his stomach growling, so she decides to prepare his lunch, but Van then suggests eating at the top of the tower. Soon enough, Van and his friends have a picnic at the top of the tower, where they can enjoy the great view of the whole village. Esparta mentions that now that they have proper buildings and facilities, it might be time to start officially calling this a town. Van is reluctant at the idea because he knows that they're probably planning to call it something silly like Van Town. They all seem to agree, saying that it's a lovely name, but Van decides to end the conversation before they actually start calling it that. Till then decides to offer them some post-meal dessert, and everyone's surprised to see that she actually baked a cake. She explains that after Belle and Rango set up shop in the village, she was able to get all the ingredients she needed to make a cake. Van is really glad to know that, because it makes him think that this might be turning into a pretty nice village after all. Everyone enjoys the cake except Till, since she has been eating cake every day now, and that made her gain a little weight. Kamson then notices people outside the village, and mentions that they don't look like soldiers or adventurers. Van decides to go see who they are, and finds a group of people in terrible conditions who ask him if this is the Sita village. Esparta explains that he heard that a people called Seato lived on this land before there was a village here, and as a result, many refer to this village as Seato. Van can't believe that this village did have a name all along and they didn't tell him. Before he can complain, an old man from from the group speaks, saying that it's changed so drastically that he still finds it hard to believe. He explains that they've come from the neighboring village, and they're taxed heavily but have few young people to do the work, so they can hardly make ends meet. That's why they came here to talk it over with the folk in Seattle, because their young ones didn't choose to leave the village, but they were taken by the count to bolster his forces in preparation for war. Van only then finds out that they're from a village in Ferdinando County, and he knows that he really shouldn't be welcoming in people from another domain, but he's fairly sure these people risked their lives to make it this far. That's why he decides to offer them to relocate here, saying that even if they don't have any money, it won't be an issue if they don't have to pay taxes for a while. After all, they have food, and he can prepare homes for them. The old man starts wondering if this is heaven, and informs him that only 10 of them made the trip today, but their village's population is about 300. Van asks them if they'll be alright with one house per family, and that sounds like a dream to all of them. Once that's decided, Van tells them that he'll get a few adventurers to go with them to escort all the villagers here. He mentions that he'll also lend them some carriages to help with their belongings, but the old man tells him that that won't be necessary, because they have cows that can carry all that. Van is shocked to hear they have dairy cows, and the old man explains that the county has rich pastures, so they have 10 cows. This is great news for Van, because with the milk the cows produce, they can make cheese, butter, and so on, which means this could be the village's major new industry. In no time, the adventurers head to that village to escort all the people to Seattle. Both Zara and Ortho are surprised by Van's generosity, since he's taking in 300 people just like that, and the reward for this quest is way too generous as well. Pluriel interrupts their conversation and asks them to keep a sharp eye on their surroundings, because last time they were so absorbed in idle chit-chat they were attacked by a forest dragon. They both go back to their posts after that, and Ortho makes sure the villagers are okay. A woman confesses that she was actually against this, because they're going from the middle of nowhere to somewhere even more remote. Ortho understands her reasoning, but assures her that this particular remote village is paradise. The woman doesn't say anything about that, but they're soon all surprised when Van welcomes them to Seattle with a feast. He mentions that they're surely all worn out from their journey, so they can fill up on barbecued meat and then get a good night's rest in the homes he's prepared for them. Soon, all the new villagers enjoy the feast, and the woman from before even starts crying about how good it is. After getting their stomachs full, the villagers ask Van if there's any work for them to do, because they want a way to earn a living. Van understands that they're all racked with anxiety, so he simply asks them to help run the inn or the new shops they're opening, and he mentions that he'll also need people to help cultivate some new fields. A man tells him that they can handle the fields, but they've never run a business before. Van reassures them, saying that they can leave calculating the money to those who can do it, so all they have to focus on is what they're capable of. Rhonda intervenes to say that ever since Van came, life in this village has improved a lot, so they'll all do everything they can to help them enjoy their lives here as well. The villagers are still reluctant to accept so much help, but Van then asks Till to bring in the shortcakes she prepared. He explains that he asked their village chief to lend them some of their cow's milk to make fresh cream. Van lets them know that they're doing them a favor by moving here, so they're just helping each other. Soon enough, they'll have a trading company in this village, which means the village will develop even further and get even more comfortable, so he hopes they'll all relax and enjoy their new lives here. The woman from before soon accepts that she might actually be able to live a good life here, and the other villagers agree with her. Everyone had their hands full just trying to survive, but they have hope now, and their minds have turned to how to enjoy their lives. Esparta tells Van that the population has grown, but they're still a long way from being a city of 10,000, so he'll need to continue developing this village. Van notices that Esparta has some cake frosting on his mustache, but he decides to ignore that and says that he'll keep working hard on his task of city building.